So Ben, we are so excited to have you joining us today. And I do want to say, I kind of feel like I'm among Cami royalty right now with you and Marcus, because if you go on YouTube and you scroll to the bottom, like it's you two that have been champion Cami since day one. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, kind of what you enjoy as a human maybe as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Happy to be here with y'all. My name is Ben Sondgeroth, and I am the lead regional educational technology coordinator, which is a mouthful and we're going to get a little more wordy here too, for the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. So there are a whole lot of words in that title and in the organization, but yeah, what I get to do is as a professional and in the EdTech world is I get to support schools and districts all through Northwest Illinois and all things educational technology. So whether it's a ton of professional development, it's consulting with schools on making decisions centered around technology. It's really anything, access to funding, support, all that type of stuff we get to do with the LTC. It's a really cool, we're a state board of education program, so we're funded by the state in the public sector, and it's really great. I like to do it, but yeah, I have a pretty long history with Cami. I remember Jim Knapp, who was one of the OGs, one of the originals with Cami. He was one of the core four, I think, one of the first four. So Jim actually and I met each other at FETC, and I want to say I think it was 2017. We'd have to check the date on the YouTube clip that's actually still up from when they interviewed me, like in the halls of FET. Actually, that one might have been ISTE. I don't know. I can't remember, but I think it was, I don't know. Anyways, like Jim like just like randomly emailed me and was like, "Hey, I see you're doing this presentation on Chrome apps and extensions. Are you going to talk about Cami?" And I actually was, like, it was in my presentation. I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Can I drop some swag off for you to give out to the people?" I was like, "Yeah, like whatever you want to do. I don't care. Like drop stuff off." And he was late and he came like sprinting in like 2 minutes before the session. It was like, "Hey, I'm Jim. Here's all this stuff from Cami." I was like, "All right, cool." He's like, "Come by the booth later." I was like, "All right." And then from there, I've just like been hanging out at their booth at conferences like ever since. And like, like getting to know everybody and doing stuff with them and being a part of the Cami family. And it's been really fun, to just get to know everybody over the course of the last, 5-6 years now, however long it's been. So that's kind of like the ed tech. I was a history teacher, high school history teacher before I got into the ed tech world. I was a baseball coach. I was a baseball player. Hence all the stuff, if you're watching that video in the background, lots of baseball things.
I have to interrupt you. What is that about coaches and social studies? Is there like some unwritten rule?
It is. Marcus, I actually wanted to just follow the biggest stereotype out there, and the one that was taken was PE teachers and coaching, and so I went for the one right below it with social studies teachers and coaching. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe it's because as a history teacher, you don't have to put a whole lot of effort into learning like new things because you're just learning about the stuff that's already been written. So maybe you can dedicate more time to coaching. I don't think that's accurate in any sense of the world capacity, but hey, we'll go with it.
I will say the coaches who do teach social studies, they're darn good at it. I just noticed that like it's a very popular subject area for athletic coaches to teach history.
You're right. It's, when I go and I talk to like, at coaching conventions and stuff, like, "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a social studies teacher." And like, "Oh, me too. Like, what do you know?" And I want to say like in my class, and I went to a small school, University of Indianapolis. We had like 5,000 kids. There was like 15 of us in the history ed program, maybe. And over half probably ended up coaching and were high school teachers. So yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Like it's definitely, personally, I live in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, Dixon, Illinois, doing good stuff here. It's fun. It's a nice place to live, good place to raise a family, got a wife and a kid, and we have a great time. So yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Oh, I was going to say probably 2020, he was very busy being in the ed tech world and doing PDs and getting people up and running to this now new normal with bringing more tech into the classroom that should have probably happened many years ago, but now kind of got forced to do.
I spent more time talking into a camera than an Instagram influencer.
We're glad you're here.
Over the course of... Let me tell you about my makeup routine real quick, because I know you all care
tell
about
me.
it.
I've been trying to
I use this foundation and... Yes, Chelsea, I did. It was, I mean, we had done some online trainings and things in the past and done some webinars, of course, but I don't think I could have ever envisioned doing as much online professional development, talking into a Zoom camera, than I did over the course of March of 2020 to still ongoing, now. Yeah, it was a whole lot of talking to myself, like you just on a Zoom call, everybody turns their camera off and it's just, I'm just staring at me. And it's like,
Yeah.
and
Fingers
kind of
crossed
joke about
someone's
the whole
listening.
makeup thing. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but also you're like, oh, I don't have a whole lot of hair, but like, I'm like, is it like my colic showing? Like I got a little redness going on today. Like, what is going on? Like, and like, yeah, probably nobody's watching, but like, hey, I'm here. It says there's a bunch of people on. Hopefully some are paying attention. So, yeah, we were really busy. We did, I think, so we were a small team at that time. Just to give you kind of a little bit of peek, I mean, Cami blew up over that time, and we blew up as an LTC. I think we did, there was about 5 of us or 6 of us that was doing a main bulk of the PD, and we did, I want to say, over 1,200 events in a year. And close to 16,000 or 17,000 attendees at those events.
Wow.
Between about, like I say, about 5 or 6 of us that was doing it. And
so basically a small concert. You definitely,
essentially, like we had a nice little tour going on virtually. Yeah. I'm not getting any royalties off of it, but,
You should, friend. You should. You're that good. You should.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm very happy that you have a good memory, because today is about reflection. Like, I'm glad that you're able to look back and remember these things. Sometimes I can't even remember what I ate yesterday. So if we're thinking about reflecting and looking back, is there something that you specifically remember when you look back that is really positive? When you look back on all of this last year, COVID, all of this, is there something you look back on and you're like, yeah?
Yeah. I like the way you phrase that too, because one of the things, so I'm a big golfer. That's one of my biggest hobbies that I have. Like, if I was to turn the camera this way, you would see a whole wall lined with photographs of golf courses that I've played. I love taking pictures and stuff. Like, my wife thinks I'm an insane person because I kind of am. But one of the things in golf is that to be a good golfer, actually, one of the things that mental coaches teach all the time is, and the struggle that golfers have is that, and I think teachers fall into this trap too, is that, and really just humans, but like if we're kind of focusing on teachers, and in my case, like the golfing place of this, when you get done with a round of golf, somebody be like, how'd you play? I'm like, oh, I played pretty good. I shot whatever I shot, but I made a bogey on this hole, or I hit it out of bounds on this hole. And immediately, like, you go back to like the bad shot that you made in the round of golf, and you don't say, well, I birdied though this hole, or I hit like an unbelievable drive and then I made a great up and down on this hole. Like, you go right to like, oh, but it could have been so much better if I would have like not made bogey there, and so like I like how you phrase that, because I think that's something that teachers fall into the trap of too, of, they're like, well, how'd the year go? Like, well, it was pretty good. I survived, but I had 6 kids out on quarantine last week, or, like I lost, like this many kids moved out of my district. And it's like, I know those are bummer things, but like, we got to talk about positive things. Like, what about the good stuff that happened, And so I think when we talk about reflection, like that's a great way to start it, because like too many people automatically go to like, well, what was the negative thing that happened? And it's like,
we'll get there.
We'll
get there.
I mean, we can talk about it, but like, we want to think first about the good, like the good stuff. And so to answer your question in a long-winded or roundabout way, positively for me, what I thought was cool was that like we did impact like that large number of people. Like, like we were able to, previous to COVID, what was happening was it was like, hey, we want you to come in and work with this district. We want you to come in and work in Illinois. We have these regional offices of education where we would do a workshop. There'd be 20 people there. Maybe, 25 if we had a good session. You go to a school district, you work with however many show up for that training, however many of the admins show up. But like with COVID, what was interesting, and in the pandemic, and even now with virtual PD, if we can take a positive out of it, is that we can reach a whole lot more people without having to travel. And we can, Zoom professional development is, while it may be tiresome now for some people, and I make the joke that I'm tired of talking to myself in the camera, it's true. But in the throes of like early spring last year, spring of 2020, summer of 2020, even into the fall, I could do a workshop with teachers in one part of the state in the morning, and I could do another one in the afternoon. Whereas previous to that, it was like I had to travel someplace, I would do the workshop, and those 20 teachers were the only 20 teachers that I was able to affect on that current day. Whereas when it happened, it was like, okay, I got a 2-hour thing in the morning, I got a break for lunch, I got a 3-hour one in the afternoon. Like, let's go. And like next thing you know, you're affecting like, multiple teachers across different areas and across different things. So when I look at the positives, I think like that was a really cool thing. Like we got to connect with a lot of people. And then the positive now that I can also reflect on is yesterday I went to my first in-person like conference. Like we actually hosted one, and it was so cool. And I know you guys are, I assume, Chelsea, you're coming to FETC too. I know Marcus is going to be there. I heard that already.
Not that one. I'll be at TCEA and then at Q. So I'm not going to FETC.
Okay. Well,
we can fix that.
FETC
we can fix that.
But like I'm sure, Marcus, you'll get this at FETC when you go. Like I went to this conference. It's just a small Illinois one. There was 300 people there, but like I saw so many people like that I hadn't seen in 2 years, and it was so good. Like it was just like so good. I was like, oh, Melissa, oh, Steve, oh, I was like, I haven't seen you guys since literally February of 2020 when the last conference happened. And it was like all my EdTech pals, and like, so like professionally I would say like affecting tons of people was really good. And then just literally yesterday was like really good.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Personally, my positive is that I value human interaction a lot more.
Yeah.
Because of what had happened last year and the year before, I really appreciate being in somebody's presence. So it's refreshing to hear you echo that. So that's why I wanted to start on positivity. I wanted to just get the tone real high, real positive. Anything you reflect on that might be positive on behalf of the kids?
I think what's positive from the kid perspective is that teachers started adopting technology at like almost a forced rate, but like that's a really good thing for the students. Like it might have been a big stress for teachers, but like in the end, that's going to help so many kids out that now they are able to have that technology in their classrooms. Whereas without the pandemic, they might not have got it yet. And so now, like their struggle was real too. Like it was super hard for those kids. Like Marcus, you talk about people and connections and valuing those. Like I can't even imagine what it was like to be a 17-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid, and not be able to go hang with your buddies and play ping pong or, watch a movie or anything like that.
Homecoming, hello. Prom, hello.
Yeah, exactly. And like we talked about me being a coach earlier, like all those lost athletic seasons, like that would have just absolutely just destroyed me as a high school kid if I wouldn't have been able to play. And so having those things back, huge positive. If we're looking in the educational world, like they get access to tech now, like the stuff that the government did to fund technology, to put devices in there, to make connectivity issues go away for a lot of the country. Like you talk about the connectivity, the personal connection with students now being back in the classroom, being back at school. I see it with my son. He's 4 years old. He's in preschool. And like just this year, like he's just so much more talkative, and he's talking about his friends and like, I talked to Simon at school and, all this. And it's like, yeah, it's awesome, and like he just, he didn't have that first semester last year when he didn't go to preschool, and he wasn't able to.
So we kind of already spoke how you're Cami royalty. So this past July, you did your Cami Connect session on the student voice and choice and how you champion student-led learning. And kind of with the shift to technology, it kind of did help bring that more forward. How does student voice and choice influence the way you should set goals with your students as a teacher?
One of the goals that I think I would try to, encourage teachers to kind of look at is, like, how can you leverage what you have in your classroom with technology to then meet the needs of those kids, but have those conversations with the students themselves? Like, don't just anticipate that like, hey, I'm going to make this awesome project and they're going to do it in this platform and they're going to love it. And you didn't ever talk to them, you know, and like you do it and it turns out that it's kind of trash. Like, and you're like, well, that didn't work. And it's like, yeah, I mean, me too, you know, and I'm like, well, and like, so like, I literally try to remember that. It's like, well, what did I do? It's like, oh yeah, I didn't talk to the kids. Like, that's a thing that I should probably do. And I think that comes to the choice component, like giving them multiple ways of picking how they want to do it, having those conversations. You know, one of the things that I hear a lot of my friends that are teachers in the classroom right now echoing is like, you know, they're talking about, oh, the kids just like, they're still not, you know, back to where they were in 2020, 2019, early 2020 pre-pandemics. Like they're not, you know, they're not in school mode yet. And, you know, they have kind of this negative connotation. I'm like, well, did you think about the trauma that they suffered? Like, you know, and like, they might not still be used to school yet, you know, like they're still kind of like remembering what it's like. And, you know, it's like, so, you know, talking to the kids, having those conversations and being like, what makes you tick? You know, what are the things that you want to accomplish within your own standards? Cause like, that's the thing that teachers go back to is like, well, I have these things I have to teach. And you're absolutely right. You have to teach those things. Like that is laid out by state standards and state law in some capacity. But like you can give opportunities for kids to do it in a way that works, hopefully for them within the confines of your curriculum and of your classroom. So, you know, that's a thing that I would say is like those conversations with the students around that, you know, go to that. So Marcus, do you have a remembrance of one that particularly failed? Because I've got a couple.
Oh my gosh, the worst. Y'all, I thought I was so cool. I like printed out these fake Facebook pages and we were going to do like characterization. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. The kids are going to love Facebook. It's social media. Girl, them kids made fun of me. They clowned me. They were like, Facebook, that's for old people. Like it was terrible. And the fatal mistake I made is I made assumptions. You know, like I set these goals for these kids and set this bar for these kids, and I never actually checked, like, what is relevant for them? If they had freedom of choice and were able to express themselves, what would they choose? Not Facebook. Right. I know now.
No.
I know now.
So I actually did that too with my kids. It was history class, and I have a funny like anecdote about that. So this is actually this is back in like 2012. So Facebook was still cool because there wasn't any like alternative yet. You know, like there wasn't Instagram wasn't really popping yet. Twitter hadn't reached the sticks of Illinois yet. Like I had a Twitter account, and the kids couldn't find me on it. That's how like still Twitter wasn't out in rural Illinois yet. And like I did like it was called like Fakebook. Like it was a website you could go on.
Oh yeah.
You could go on their iPads
It still exists.
Yeah. And like they could make their own little profile. So I actually had them do world leaders and like from history. So like I had them like World War II. I had like, hey, make a Facebook page and have it be Hitler's Facebook page, but like Stalin's commenting and FDR is commenting, and they really liked it. I didn't realize that like fast forward 5 to 7 years to 10 years later now that like our government leaders actually like do that now. And like they do comment on like social media to each other. And like, you know, like, oh, like I thought it was a kind of a fun, like hypothetical, like what if our government leaders used social media to like talk about people and like, oh, they do, like, you know, like that's a real thing, you know, 10 years later, like they're actually doing it. And yeah, so it was just like, when you said that social media thing, like I remember back to that one, that was oh, that's interesting. I don't think I could do that now. Like, because they like, I
feel very triggered. I feel very triggered. I thought I was so cool. I showed up with a shirt and tie on and everything. I was like, I am going to dress up today.
No, I did one. I think mine came to when I had, my first devices, I had iPads. And that was when iPads were the only thing really. You could have laptops, you could have netbooks, if you remember.
I had netbooks.
Or you could have.
We'll unpack that on next episode or something. But the netbooks were trash.
Allowed those fans spun and like they're this big and yeah. Oh man. So I got iPad 2s and I just like, I would say, all right, guys, we're going to do project and like do a keynote. And so they would do a keynote on the iPad. And then like we'd do the next unit, be like, okay, do a keynote. And they would do a keynote. And then I realized like listening to 160 keynotes like every other week was like the absolute worst as a teacher. I was like, it wasn't maybe so bad for the kids, but like for me, like I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here and listen to every world history kid do a keynote for 3 periods straight. Like we gotta find something else. Like you can't do a keynote anymore. Do an iMovie, do something different, but no more PowerPoints, no more keynotes. We're done. That's it.
I love how you just shared your failed teacher lesson and not on the student's perspective, because I couldn't think of a lesson. I taught kindergarten. I was the art teacher for the whole school. So kindergarten through 5th grade. It was fall, and I was like, oh, I have a great idea. All these kids are going to decorate this outline of a fall leaf, and I'm going to make a billboard in the office. They all did it. I didn't think about who was going to cut out all of the leaves because they didn't have time to do that. So I spent probably 2 hours cutting out every single leaf to make the billboard in the office. So I didn't think through to that step as a teacher. It was a great moment.
Yeah.
I feel like as adults, we do a pretty good job, especially this time of year, of reflecting. I mean, the entire vibe of today's episode is about reflecting. Every conversation we're having is about reflecting on us. But I want to flip it and go back to the kids. How important is it for the kids to reflect at this time of year?
So I have a kind of like a session that I do at conferences. I've done it a couple of times where like it's like the art of reflection, and talking about just that, like, you know, encouraging students to be reflective. Really that session focuses on their learning. And in some of the research that I did for that session, it was pretty eye-opening. Like you said, Marcus, like we, as adults, we always like to look back. Like, I don't know about you guys, but if you remember your not your sub plans, but your lesson plans you had to write in college for the College of Education, I'm sure you guys had to do the same thing I had to do, where like it was like they were 13 or 14 pages long.
You're triggering me again. You're triggering me.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
I know. Yeah. Like, oh, you like, and you get done. You're like you're doing them in the real time. You're like, there's no way I do this for every lesson. And then you get into teaching. You're like, yeah. No chance. But like, I remember those, every one of them had a reflection component at the end that, you know, you had to write a reflection after your lesson and how it went. And I would always get to that point. I'd be like, you know, I was a college kid. I didn't want to do anything more than I had to. And I'd be like, God, why do I have to do one more thing? And then I like started to like understand that like, that's how you learn. Like you look back, you learn. That could be a little bit of the history teacher in me too. Like we analyze what happened in the past to make better choices in the future. And I think that's really important for kids too, both in the classroom to have them reflect. You know, that's kind of the whole concept of a study guide before a test. Like look back on all the stuff we did and then you'll be good to go for the test. But it could be simpler than that, more condensed, or like more a larger picture, you know, of something more creative too than like, hey, here's a study guide with 25 questions on it, like fill it out and remember everything we did. Because that's how the brain learns. That's how the brain remembers things is by that reflection and that going back and remembering what happened and, you know, taking that into account. And so when we talk about doing that with our kids, like it's important, I think, to think of creative ways to do it, because like I said, like College Ben didn't want to reflect. College Ben was ready to just like get to the night.
I was ready to get a paycheck, baby.
Boys.
I was like, I'm tired of being broke.
That's right. Yeah, I'm tired of paying at Buffalo Wild Wings with a bunch of change that I found in my change drawer.
If you don't stop triggering me, if you don't stop.
I got one better for you. I brought my own ranch dressing one time because they were charging 50 cents for ranch, and I brought my own bottle with me. That's how broke I was at the time. I was like, take that, B-dubs. I got my own Hidden Valley. I'm taking that right now.
Extreme couponers.
Yeah. But yeah, so like thinking of like creative ways to get your kids to reflect, because if you tell them like, hey guys, we're going to reflect today, they could be like, what are we doing with that? So I think making like fun activities, like getting them, like goes kind of back to Chelsea, your question previously about voice and choice. Like, you know, exit tickets work. Teachers like exit tickets, but like coming up with different ways of getting them to do it. Like it's not always just hey, write this down. Like, what'd you learn today? You know, like in Cami, you can be like, hey, put an audio comment at the end of our Cami document and like just kind of like debrief, like what'd you go over in here, you know, and like, and if we kind of big picture that out, you know, at the end of a semester, at the end of a unit, or at the end of the year, you know, like, hey, reflect back. Like, what did you learn? What did you enjoy about this topic? What were some takeaways that you had about science, about math, about history, you know, like about art, like, you know, getting them to go big picture, because kids are always like, for the most part, I find they're very narrow focused because they're, you know, they're young, they just want to get to the next day. And, you know, giving them an outlet and a way to think back and reflect, I think is super important. And being creative in it, like I said, like don't just do the same thing every day, every unit, every semester. You know, I think that's really important.
And something I always think about too is students spend a lot of time at school, like a huge chunk of their day. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there would be importance of having them reflect on things outside of school, like personal goals, maybe goals that they have for sports, maybe reflecting on the trauma that they may not realize that they had within the last 12 months? Do you think that's important to bring into the classroom since they spend 8 hours plus on that campus?
No, I do. I think and I think that's also like for a teacher, like when you're looking to make those connections with your kids, I think the teachers that students always gravitate towards are the ones that ask them about stuff outside of their classrooms, right? Like, and they become human, they humanize the kid, they humanize themselves. You know, I know one of my buddies that I taught with at Morrison, like he would start every class. I was a business teacher. Every Monday, he'd just be like, hey guys, what'd you guys do this weekend? And like the kids would tell him about their weekend. He'd take 5 minutes at the start of every class. They talk about their weekend. And I tell you what, everybody loved Mr. Coughlin. And I think it's because I would do a lot of the same stuff. And like, I feel like I had a great relationship with all my kids too. And it was, you just humanize them. You give them that chance to talk about stuff, because you never know too, like, you know, what they're dealing with like at home. And maybe they don't have a mom and dad that asks them about like, what was school like today? Or, you know, what's going on in your life, and they're working all the time or whatever. And so like when you give a student a chance to talk about sports, to talk about their weekend, to talk about their vacation, you know, it's important for their development just as a human, you know, and it's important for those relationships too. And I think that also, like, we fight like this concept of teacher burnout, you know, a lot, which is a real thing. And I don't know, like, I think when I talk to some of my friends that I'll just, you know, flat out tell them, I'm like, I think you've lost a little bit of touch with the kids. Like you're angry. Like I got one that I can think of right now that he's always bitter. And it's like, dude, like I hear some of the stuff you say. It's like, you got to act like you've lost that connection. And I think asking them to reflect on some of that, you know, can be really important for everybody's mental health, you know, going forward, of talking about that stuff, making those fun things. Like that's why we teach, is to affect kids' lives. Not because I like to talk about history all the time. Like if I wanted to do that, I'd go into academia, and that's way too boring. So, you know, like it's, you know, so yeah, I think that's super important, Chelsea, like making those connections, getting the kids to think back, you know, just developing a well-rounded young person, you know, is important.
Yeah. For me, what I took away from what you just said is it's kind of like the way you ask it. Like putting the reflection box at the bottom of the page is not enough. Because if you tell somebody, reflect, the kid's just going to stare at you. Reflect like a mirror. Like, you know, if you really want to pull it out of them, I think about the first question I asked you. I specifically said positive. Like I wanted to pull something positive out of you. And so I like your idea that it has to be intentional, but also be aware of what you're actually asking. Because if you just keep it open-ended, they're going to stare at you.
Exactly. How was school today? Good.
Good. Fine.
Fine.
What'd you learn?
Stuff.
Yeah.
We're on the same wavelength. You know, it's like, so here's we actually just did for work, for the LTC, we have a lady who's certified from KSL, who is specializes in SEL. And she did a quick presentation on trauma and SEL in the classroom for us to kind of understand some things. And that was her big takeaway, Marcus, was was talking about the right words to use. And I always try to pride myself on that when I do a workshop with teachers of I don't ever call something easy, because what's easy for me is not easy for Chelsea, but what's easy for Chelsea is not going to be easy for me. So that's a very much a word that, like, when I say, oh, it's so easy, then people are like, when it's not easy to them, they're like, well, I'm dumb, so I'm not going to be able to learn this. So like I very rarely try to say that. I say that word, but I said something, I can't remember what exactly it was, but I made a statement at the end of our conversation on SEL, and I said, I should be better at doing that. And she came back with, you're shoulding all over yourself right now. Don't should on yourself. And I was like, okay, it's kind of funny because I could never see this lady ever saying a curse word in her entire life. And she just made the innuendo to one. But she's like, should has the connotation that you're not doing enough. And that when you say like, yo, hey, Chelsea, you should be doing something. You should be doing this. And Marcus, you should be doing that. You might have that like, that kind of like, oh, but I thought I was like, but I should do more. So I have to do more. Like, and like, you might not feel like you're getting up to like your potential then. And, that really struck me. I was like, wow, you're right. Like we need to evaluate those words and those little kind of trigger words that, can set a kid or another adult, another co-teacher, or if you're an admin, going into a classroom being like, you should do this. And that teacher's like, oh, but I'm trying so hard right now because everything's so hard. And then you say you should, and they just don't feel adequate. And that can be, something that could really help. So, or it could be a detriment to them. So when we think about reflecting, maybe we need to evaluate that in the words that we use and that type of stuff. So yeah, that's a very good point.
And that goes back to that positive thing, shifting everything to positive, not that little negative connotation with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one that I heard was stop using the word but and use now. So like, Marcus, you're doing a great job hosting this podcast, but you could be a little bit better at this.
You should have kept that comment to yourself is what you should have
done. Now, if we just put Chelsea in charge of the podcast, that was a little bit better, but like, that was an interesting one that I also tried to erase from my vocabulary when I'm talking to people like, oh, do that. But, if you did this, because they're like, well, I wasn't doing that already. Now, if you do this, like, they're like, oh, so I have the first step. I'm building on it with a now. If you put a button there, you kind of like, you cut it off and it's not good enough anymore. So like, now do this. So what you were doing was okay, but you can build on that. But if you put the but in there, it's like, you weren't quite making it up to where you needed to be, and I have to like tell you now because I am better than you. So yeah, I think wording, and I think if we go back to the theme of reflection, that's a big key to like the whole reflection thing, because if your reflection is all, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have done this, like all you're doing is really just, you're not reflecting on the right things. You're reflecting on ways you could have been better. Like you have to look at ways you can improve, but not in the fact that everything was a negative and that you should have, because you can't, like, you can't go back and change that. Like you can't, a shoulda, woulda, coulda, like it's done. It's in the past. Make the adjustments when you come into that equation moving forward. So words are powerful. Yeah.
And I liked how you said that now, because it is almost like a stepping stone towards your next goal and not just stopping you there. And this kind of brings us kind of to a closing of, do you have any goals that you've thought of for yourself next year? I know that I didn't even realize it's like mid-November and the new year's coming soon until I saw this theme for the podcast. And I was like, oh, I should probably I don't do it a lot every year, but start thinking about some goals. So have you thought about any goals for yourself in the coming year as we close 2021?
I always try to we actually have yearly evaluations for my job, and my boss is super good at being very encouraging, and, he wants us to make sure we do have measurable goals. Like that's a big thing. And we set goals for ourselves. We're not held, we're held accountable to them, but not to the point of like, if you don't achieve this goal, you're fired or you get a pay cut or, things like that. It's more like, no, make sure it's measurable. Like you don't want to, and I think that's a big key to people too, is like, I want to lose weight next year. And it's like,
yes,
great. So but like, what does that mean? You know, like what is, you know, like if it's like I lost weight. So if you lost 1 pound, then you're like, well, did you achieve your goal? Because you stepped on the scale and it went from this number to this number, you lost it. But like, are you happy with that goal that you lost 1 pound? Because 1 pound's like, that's just like how much water you drink in a day, you know? So like when you make it measurable, it's like, I want to do this. I want it to be, you know, able to be held accountable to it. I want it to be measurable and I want it there. And I think that's really important when people set goals. For me personally, I've started to think because I've, you know, and actually since it is about evaluation time at work, I have to start reflecting on what my goals were last year. And did I achieve those goals? Like, did I hit those marks that I wanted to? And I think I did. Like, as I'm kind of like going through my brain, like I'm pretty sure I met at least 2 of the 3. One of my goals is to work more with administrators this year on supporting their teachers. I think that's a big thing that, you know, administrators have had a very difficult year trying to manage all of the stuff that's going on with COVID and, you know, teachers in and out, no subs, kids quarantined, staff quarantined, shortage on paraprofessionals. That one of my fears as a technology professional is that we go into now a second year of basically people having devices and no substantial shift in how those devices are being used is happening. And so my goal is to continue to work with administrators on building up that capacity for them to lead their staff on making substantial change in how they're teaching with their kids. So then you're like, well, Ben, what's a measurement on that? And it's, mine would be like hosting multiple workshops with regional offices of education in Illinois for administrators on that. You know, like I'll set a couple of goals on administrator academies is what they're called here in Illinois on just doing that, you know, and supporting that. So that's one of my big goals, I think, as a professional is, you know, focusing on that leadership capacity to empower administrators to help their staff get better. So like I've spent a lot of time with teachers. I want to help the admins now too become more you know, versed in being able to talk about these technologies to their staff and to identify good uses of technology in the classroom. So that's one of my big goals, I think, you know, and that was one of my goals this year, and I achieved it to a point, and I just want to continue like to grow it, like you know, and make that more of a steady focus, you know, professionally going forward. So that's one of mine, my big one, I think, going into 2022.
I really liked how, Ben, you said you reached that goal this year, but you want to expand it into next year. So just because you do reach that goal in one singular year, that doesn't mean that goal now disappears and that's that. So I guess in terms of my work life, I would just love to continue supporting the teachers that use Cami, that I talk to every day. One of my big goals is working more, which is kind of already happening, working with those district tech teams, like you said, the admin, in helping them get the technology working correctly in their classroom. So this week alone, I talked to 2 big districts in Texas who really want to work one-on-one with me to get that support, to get then the support down to their teachers and help them understand how to use this technology that they're now being asked to use. So just continuing that, continuing those relationships, being there when they need me, doing demos, supporting them any which way. Marcus, what about you?
The real reason I asked you to go first is because I didn't know what I was going to say. So thank you. Now I know. I would say my goal for the next year, again, is to continue. Thank you, Ben, for that. Like, I'm not using but, I'm going to use now. I want to proactively inspire people more. I've realized at this age in my life, as I reflect, that I tend to be like a really positive beacon for people. People really be like, oh my God, Marcus, you're so funny. You are so fun. And I'm like, okay, that's cute, but I'm not a comedian. But I do think there's something powerful about being an adult who can relax and smile, who can laugh and not take things so seriously. And my goal is to inspire teachers to do the same, that we could sit here all day and do a whole podcast show about all of the negative things that are happening right now. But that's not my style. That's not the Marcus Stein brand. So next year and beyond, I just want to be more proactive about the people I meet, sharing my strategies of how I do stay so upbeat. By the way, I pulled a muscle in my back and it's been killing me this entire time, but you would never know. You would never know.
Didn't see that coming at all. Nope.
No.
Nope.
I got my lumbar pillow. It's time to move on. And so next year, I just want to share that gift, my gift of positivity, and just show people how much of an impact it can have on the rest of the people around you, especially the kids.
Absolutely. It's so important too, like, you know, for everybody to do that. But if you have that power, you know, like, and it's you know, if you can go Spider-Man, like with great power comes great responsibility, as his grandpa said, like, you know, it's important, right? Like I find, Marcus, I'm the same way. Like I always try to be positive. I have, like, people are like, you have so much patience. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't have my job if I wasn't a patient person, because then I'd be a grouch and nobody would want to hire me to do what I do. So like, I have to be patient, like, you know, and yeah, do I like close the car door after a workshop and just go, oh my gosh, what did I just do? But you would never see me do it in person. You know, like I'm never going to show that. I'm never going to break. I've had a couple of times where I've been very close. Like I even got called out on it once by the lady who was like organizing it. She's like, she texted me from the back of the room. She's like, you almost broke there, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah, that was though I walked 7,000 steps in a 5-hour workshop around a conference room. 7,000 steps in a conference room because of all of the questions that were being asked. And it was tough. Anyways, that's a whole nother story. We can talk about that.
You know what? We're going to have you back. We're going to have to do this again. We're going to have a part 2 where we just dish. We're just going to call it like the dish episode, where we just go off about all these experiences. But what I think makes us all common here is this emphasis on we're reflecting, we're looking back, but we're smiling. We're smiling as we look back.
Yep.
I like that.
Yep. Yeah, you have to. Like, it's just, you know, like what's the purpose of being a grumpy person in life, you know, and like thinking about the negatives and like all that, like why be miserable? Like you only get so much time on this rock, you know, like anyways, you know, not to get real meta on everybody, and not the Facebook rebranding on that, but like, but like, you know, like really, like that's kind of how, like when Vanessa reached out about like the topic and she's like, we think you'd be good. I was like, yeah, I'd love being like reflective and positive and looking at things. And, you know, like it's just, we're here, like, let's have a good time and have fun and enjoy it. And, you know, see where everything leads. And I appreciate, you know, you two sharing that positivity and that light, because it is super important, especially around education. That's super hard right now, for a lot of people. And I understand that, you know, it's probably hard for a lot of people to go home positive after a day in the classroom. You know, and you know, personally, I think I have actually the book right here. Oh, come on. Maybe not. I don't know if I can find it quick. Yeah, I don't know. It's in this. But look at all these cami stickers that I actually.
I didn't know it was show and tell time.
Right. I was looking for something else, and I found a bunch of cami stickers that I probably got sent like, right before.
Cami hero little decal.
Look at me.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's sitting right here.
OG.
Yeah.
Told you, cami royalty. Yeah.
Yep. And that was not planted there by any means. It just sits on my desk. Like, that's exactly. I don't know. I can't find it. I was going to say, like, I just had a book from when I was student teaching that a kid wrote in there, like, this kid barely talked, but he was like, and my co-operating teacher did something really cool where she had the kids like write in this like little journal about like what I meant to them as a student teacher. Oh. And it was awesome. And like, I've got it. I just, you know, I wasn't prepared for a prop. But like, it was really neat because like they wrote in it, like, you know, we really liked you. It was great. You were awesome. You were so fun. And so like you get done with 8 weeks of teaching, you know, student teaching that's really hard and you don't know if you did anything right or not. And you got to read it and it was so neat. And one of the kids wrote in there and he's like, I remember he wrote something and I like wrote on his, like gave him feedback. I was like, you're a really good writer. Like, you know, you should do this more. And like he wrote in that book, he never said anything to me in person, but he wrote in that book, that little journal, like, thanks for telling me I was a good writer. No one had ever told me that before. And I was like, whoa, like, this is pretty cool. Like as a, you know, like as a human, as a teacher, I was like, this is neat. You know, like that was that impact moment, right? Of like, it's there. And I worry that sometimes maybe teachers aren't getting that impact moment because masks in school, they're not seeing facial expressions. They're, and we all work for technology companies, but like sometimes tech eliminates some of that personal touch a little bit of different things. And so like finding ways of reconvening that, I think, is important to reflect on too, of a little bit. So yeah,
those kids kind of forced the reflection on you. Like their gift to you was the reflection that you didn't know you needed.
Yes.
That's a beautiful thing. Shout out to teachers who do that. Ask the kids to make a scrapbook. My kids made me a scrapbook at the end of the year one time, and it was just all these gushing comments about moments that I totally forgotten about throughout the year.
Yeah.
And so teachers, if y'all are looking for a way to know how you doing, ask your kids.
Yeah.
Ask your kids.
Yeah. And if you're a teacher and you see one of your colleagues that's like down about it, figure out a way to maybe do that for them, right? Like go behind them a little bit, get to their class somehow, get to some of their favorite students, create something for them that they don't know that's coming from their kids. And that could make a big difference too.
Write that down, everybody.
Like, so
write that down.
Yeah,
that is
that
is a
really
teacher
cool.
appreciation gift. Like that.
100%.
That is invaluable.
Yep.
Wow. I'm glad we got that moment, because now I'm like, I'm about to call all my friends' classrooms and say, reflect on the teacher, because I still cry when I look back on that scrapbook.
Yeah. I still have it somewhere. I swear it's in this drawer, I think.
Mine's over there.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like we taught at the same school, Ben. I feel like you and I have
right?
very similar experiences.
Yep.
And I appreciate it.
I feel like
man.
I needed
appreciate
to
it.
get my teaching credential in Illinois because I did way more than 8 weeks of student teaching here in California.
No, I did
you said that,
I did 16.
Oh, okay.
I did 16, but I did 8 at I had to do 8 at a high school and 8 at a middle school. So
Okay, that's the same here, 'cause I was like-
time. So yeah, I did.
Wait
I
a
did 16.
second.
I did a full semester.
It was the longest 16 weeks of my life. I was so broke. I ran out of outfits. I was like, I'm a college student. I'm wearing the same old Navy pants every day with the same polo the kids wear. Like I was basically wearing a uniform shirt.
Yeah.
Broke.
Yep.
I am so glad we are discussing this topic, especially at the end of the school year. Reflecting can be a scary thing, but it can also be a really positive thing. So I'm really thankful we had Ben today for reminding all of us about your word choice when you're choosing to reflect. So thank you, Ben.
And Marcus, you took my idea. I really loved the shift to now. And thinking about how your goals, like I said previously, don't have to disappear. You can continue building on those. So thank you for shifting my personal mindset.
Awesome. Well, I will throw the thanks right back at you guys for having me, being very easy and fun to talk to, and also for thinking of this topic, because it's a super important one. I think, as we reflect on the year, there's not a lot of time I'm sure teachers have taken to reflect, and I think it's something that we need to make sure we encourage them to do. And to reflect on those positive mindsets that we've spent a good majority of the episode talking about, just positive, and just thinking about those good things, the good vibes only. That's the only way you can kind of, I'm not one to be like a kind of like a hippie mindset or anything like that, but I'm all about the good vibes. So
Yeah, Marcus, I almost just raised my hand. I was like, I am.
I was like, I am. I'm a bit of a tree hugger over here. So big thank you, Ben. Big thank you for being here, friend.